Hello and welcome everyone to the 379th meeting of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. My name is Bill Cardelopoulos. It has been my pleasure this season to co-curate the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium with Ben Catchor and Austin English. The New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium is a weekly speaker series that started as an offshoot of Occupy Wall Street as a way of creating kind of public free education outside of the academy. And this has developed into a weekly speaker series on the subject of comics and other forms of visual narrative. I'm very excited that we're debuting or we're opening our spring 2024 season with Nate Garcia. I'm going to read a bio and then we'll be hearing from Nate. Nate is a cartoonist living and working in Philadelphia who has made a name for himself in self-publishing, most known for his ongoing funny animal cowboy comic series, Alanzo Sneak, which has been translated into French. He has self-published many books, including 3 issues of his previous series, HORNRIM, Muscle Horse, Gecko, Jambalaya, Plum Pocket, and his latest work, Flippy, published by Austin English's Domino Books. Everyone, please join me in welcoming once and for all the young, great Nate Garcia. Take it away, Nate.
Welcome, everybody. Wow. So I'm seeing I'm seeing all these people here, and I'm thinking, wow, I really should have never done this. But we're just going to have to do it. I lost my notes in the in-between period of time that was this working and not working, and then almost working, and then letting me completely down. But Peggy has been here, and she's quite ready. She's not so nervous. She doesn't need to say a word, though, quite honestly. My name is Nate Garcia. I was born in 2002 after 9/11, so to me it's a myth. And I was drawing comics for a very long time. And I started drawing very small, right out of the womb. I didn't have a lot of friends. And I started to draw since I could hold a pencil, and I started to draw these stories about my teacher in the first grade in elementary school in San Antonio, Texas. I was born in Allentown, Pennsylvania, an hour away from Philadelphia, and many more hours away from Texas. And I had a teacher in the first grade who was very supportive of the arts and very creative and exciting. Her name was Kimberly Cervenka, and she would read Mo Willems' books to me and the whole class, and really sparked some kind of imagination out of most of the kids. Most of the kids weren't really friends with me because I was drawing. I was making clay, putty people hanging off of the cliff of the desk when I was that age. And I became very inspired by comics, by Bone, Jeff Smith. Kimberly Cervenka gave me a copy of Old Man's Cave, the 6th edition in the Scholastic colorized version of Bone, published in the early 2000s. Don't look so sad. And she gave me a lot of inspiration, and she started to tell these stories about her life. She was a middle-aged 20 or mid-20s person talking to 5 to 7-year-old people all the time. And I'm sure the ego of a 20-something-year-old teacher at the time would have really appreciated all the effort that I did in validating her life's crises. She would talk about how her dog peed on her dad, or her roommate is cheating on her with her boyfriend, and all of these things. And I would turn them into paper media artifacts. Here is one of them. Miss Cervenka finds a time machine. Back cover. We also have Miss Cervenka 7 Stories, How I Spend My Summer Vacation. Mrs. Perez, another teacher in this school, from Paris. See, they go on a trip. I found a lot of solace in creating different worlds for myself to escape to, because I had no friends at this time period in my life. And I remember having friends that were very nice people in ages 5 to 10. But then after a few weeks, they would start to say, well, Nate, you're a little bit weird. I don't know if I really want to hang out with you. You're a little bit weird. And they wouldn't be so close to me anymore. I remember one time my friend Thomas told me how he talked to his mom about how he didn't know if he should be friends with me anymore. And he wanted to spend his recess playing sports and not sitting with me drawing on the playground. So I had to, I was left to my own devices really to explore feelings. And I would do things like Mr. Vanka goes on a date with Stuart. This is a cat. You can see here there is a artificial barcode on these books here. I was very obsessed with making it like a real product, validating the hard work I'm putting into these pamphlets. I mean, there's literally hundreds of them from 2008. I gave them all to her, and she's mailed them to me because I'm scanning them for preservation. But this obsession with comic pamphlets and such really never went away from a very small age. It was all I thought about was comics all day long, and I drew them all day long. This one here, Mr. Vanka play of songs and nursery rhymes and teachers at school. And I don't know what these titles really have nothing to do with the content at all. This stuff, I thought of this character based off of her cat that she did have, and made him a friend. And all of these people that I was drawing were my friends, and it never stopped. It went on, and I continued this very strange obsession with a human character and an animal in some sort of close relationship. And I really did not plan on this, but I noticed that I had the same inclination for the barcode about 10 years later, or I guess less than 10 years. I've been making zines since 2008. This is 2008. This is 2022 or 2023. And I hit some blocks in middle school. I continued to do comics, but I was moving every single year. My parents wanted to move, and this would just create more loneliness and lack of friendship. And so after I moved from Texas to Pennsylvania, again, I had started doing this comic called Mr. Banana in 4th grade, and I would sell prints of the newspaper strip on the playground for 50 cents. And I was making so much money that I actually I started to invest in Cheeto. No, I'm kidding. But I kept on going, and fourth grade, I moved to another school, and I started to do these comics called Nate and Scott, which was just me inventing a friend to have. And it was, very therapeutic. And comics have always been this therapeutic thing for me, and this escape. I found that when I was little, if I was very bored, I could make a comic where the Cat in the Hat goes to the airport and flies to Hawaii on vacation. And I swear to God, I would get the exact same dopamine as if I were going on a vacation to Hawaii myself, just me in real life. And this new superpower really just like felt like I was completely free, and it didn't really matter to me if I didn't have any friends, and it didn't really matter to me if they thought I was weird or they were all of these things. The closest thing to a vacation to Hawaii that I had when I was little was one time after school, my parents let me go. They surprised me and told me I was going to see the Diary of a Wimpy Kid film adaptation because I was a big fan of the books, read them at the library, school library, where I also was introduced to more issues of Bone. I was very confused at the time why is there the Scholastic version that's in color, and then there are these other versions that are in black and white? And this really piqued my curiosity at the time in 2009. And this was a time when internet was being introduced to children for the first time. I guess maybe second time. But they were giving computer lab classes where children could interact with games on the computer, and these games were real shit. I didn't really like putting the triangle shape into the trapezoid and seeing if it fits for 10 minutes to prove that I can do math on a computer. No thanks. So I would go on Google and I would look up all this stuff about comics. I would try to see what's Bone really all about. And if you're in Google and you're looking up Bone, don't just look up Bone, because you get some strange things and they send you to an office in 2009. But I found out that Jeff Smith was a man, and he is someone who made this comic. And it brought a lot of reality to this new obsession that I had with this comic Bone that my teacher gave me. And my teacher, she would staple books for me, like of blank pieces of paper, and put them in my backpack before I go home from school. And so I just had like millions and millions of blank stapled paper, and I would just create stories based off the stories that she told the class, stories that maybe a 5-year-old, 7-year-old should really be internalizing and reproducing for art, But these things, they've spoken to something that I can't really explain. I see a lot of similarities from these times to now, and it's a bit creepy to look at. I just got a box of them. I asked my teacher to send me them. We still keep in contact on Facebook. But after elementary school, I kept on doing comics in middle school, and I still kept on doing research on these people who make comics. Found out Jeff Smith was really obsessed with Walt Kelly, and then I found Walt Kelly, and I was reading Pogo and Funny Animal Comics, and then I was reading Durf Backdurf. And I never really quite got into underground comics until I was 18 years old. And by that point, I'd already drawn so many comics and quit. I would do this thing where I would draw 3 pages of a comic and do the coloring on the piece of paper, and do these very heavily painted illustrations. And then I would quit 3 pages in because I didn't think it was good enough. I think exposure to a child of the library graphic novel was a mistake. I think it was a major misstep in comics, because it put in the mind of all of these children that for them to be able to make a comic, they have to make a 1,000-page graphic novel. And that's like, it kind of fooled adults too that were making comics for the first time in like the early 2000s. But my God, a child. It's like, my knowledge of comics is going to the library and picking out a 1,200-page hardcover book that you then look up on the internet and find out it took 13 years to make. I mean, what kind of horrible mental illness are we trying to spread? Think about this. And I was a victim of this, and I didn't have any permission at all to indulge in the 3-page beauty of an underground comic story that you might find in a Spain Rodriguez comic, Robert Williams comic, Zap comics, underground stuff that it took me so long to find. So long. And I finally, was going through the basement of my father's house, and I found blankets, and I became very obsessed with Blankets by Craig Thompson, because it was a very true, real comic. But again, it was a graphic novel, very thick, phone book style, blue phone book style with boobs inside. Looking at it, losing my mind, seeing a drawing of a boob, seeing 3 hatching lines to imply pubic hair. This was like at 9 years old, me seeing Blankets for the first time blew my brain off. And I experienced for the first time as well complete immersion in a real dramatic comic. And I remember my father yelling at me for my grades at the time being so bad, all D's, all F's, and they were telling me all of this stuff, and I was just completely tuning it out, because that same day I was reading Blankets for like hours and hours, and I was like, well, I don't really care, because I'm immersed in this other thing, and it felt so good to just escape my consequences and just be like, well, whatever you're saying, that's all fine and well, but I've got to read a comic later, so I'm gonna feel good in about 10 minutes when I go back to my room. And I did, and I used that same escape for years and years, and I then found a book in the same basement of called The Illustrated Life, which was a sketchbook compendium published by, I wish I remembered his name, nice guy, and he made many books of different artist sketchbooks, and Crumb sketchbook was on there, and my dad told me I wasn't supposed to look at it, and I looked at it, and I just saw fragments of something, and they didn't have it was sketchbook pages that were in the book from God knows where I would have never known at the time. And I tried to find them at my library, and they didn't have them in my school library because it's Robert Crumb, and they didn't have them in any other place I could find them except this library that was in the middle of my city in Lower Macungie. And my mom was driving to to babysit every single day in the summer when I was in fifth grade, and would drop me off at the library for 6 hours a day while she's at work and pick me up on her way back. It was the same route, and I would stay there. And I found all the Chrome comics, but they were all these paperback collections. And I found a bunch of comics, Dave Cooper comics, and I was at the library every day, and I would get so excited every single day in the summer just to go to the library and draw my comics and look at these books. And then I later found out that the books inside of the Crumb paperbacks were published originally in pamphlet format and magazine format. And I thought, man, where are all the magazines? I'm sitting here with Highlight magazine. I'm sitting here with Bop magazine. I don't want to know who Cody Simpson's fucking Justin Bieber now. Selena Gomez is gay, but then she's not gay. Nobody knows. It's 2010. It sucks. They don't got Zap comics in the stores. They don't got even Image comics in the supermarkets. People that are from young in the 90s got to get all of these beautiful privileges with public media. Comics media, and now at that time all I had was the highlights in the Bot magazine, Justin Bieber tabloids, and so I seeked it out on the internet again, and I found somebody selling a big lot of underground Zap comics from the late 60s to the mid 70s. I mean, by the mid 70s it got real mid 70s, emphasis on mid, but it's just because they're doing all these drugs. And I was just, I finally found these beautiful things. This is a cover that ripped off of my copy of Zap number 5, and this really blew my mind when I saw it. Just the fact that this is only 32 pages, and on the cover it has nothing to do with anything on the insides. And on the insides it was 3-page stories where nothing really happens, and you could tell they love to draw. And by this point, I'd been filling up about 8 sketchbooks a year drawing, just compulsive drawing, every class, high school. We hit high school. I'm completely obsessed with drawing. It's all I do. And I'm also failing again. And I was playing with my mother's printer at the time, and I photocopied 2 pages from my sketchbook, and I folded it, and it looked like a book. And then that was the same time when all these Zap comics were coming in the mail. And I was completely finally given the permission to just make stories that were, didn't really have any stakes to them. They didn't have to be a 1,000-page graphic novel. And I was like, just my mind was blown. I was just making a million comics in my sketchbook. And then I just kept on scanning them. And I thought, how nice would it be if I could have like a complete time capsule every single month of just the comics that I'm making, so I could, because I've always processed the world through drawing. And that brings us to HORNRIM 1. When I was 17 years old, 18 years old, the COVID-19 hit. COVID-19, I would like to thank personally, because it's the only way that I was able to graduate high school, because the people in my high school made a thing where because of COVID, everything was either pass or fail. So if you got above a D, you were passing, and that was the same as if you got 100 A+. And this was perfect for me. And I just completely guessed on every test and every assignment, and I just, it was based on participation completely. It wasn't based on skill or correctness. And I was working my job at the time in my senior year of high school when I was 17 and 18 years old at Yako's Hot Dog King in Allentown, Pennsylvania. And this is a place that was cash only, and they didn't take anything but cash. There was about 4 chains in my city of Allentown, Pennsylvania, and they don't have lettuce. There'd be, very old, beautiful people working there, but very old people, people that shouldn't have been even looking at hot dogs because of the sodium. And they were eating the hot dogs every day. People would come in, say, "Can I get a hamburger? Oh, what do you want on it? Lettuce. We don't got lettuce. Okay. I'll get tomato and we don't got tomato. You got pickles. We got onions." And that's it. And this was a place cash only, old as fuck people, 100 years strong. And they would come, and by the time COVID was happening, they were coming in gas masks. And these people are 90 years old getting their hot dogs, giving me quarters to pay for these hot dogs. And my mother suffers from multiple sclerosis. And I didn't want to endanger my mother for a $7.25 minimum wage hot dog lifestyle in my senior year of high school. And by this point, I was working. School was shut down, and all sorts of dread was running amok between everyone in the workplace and school life and such. And I really had to get out of there, and I ended up on unemployment benefits for about a year, and I got enough money to finally go put a deposit on the art college that I thought I was going to go to. I had some friends that I worked with at Dorney Park when I was a caricature artist, and they wanted to go to this art school in Philadelphia, and they said you can get a lot of money off. This is the Pennsylvania Academy of the Fine Arts. This is a very old school. George Washington's slaves' ghosts still run amok. He used to be friends with the people that own the school, and apparently they kept the slaves in the school. I mean, my God, that's no fun. And they were not really giving so much money off, and I was feeling quite dreadful because I had I'm going to be honest right now with numbers here, $14,000 in my bank account because of the unemployment benefits over a year's time from COVID, because I couldn't work, so I didn't want to endanger my mother, because I lived with my mother, and I was 17 years old. And so I thought to myself, well, I could either, ruin my life and go to art school and go to COVID art school where I'm sending a JPEG of an 18 by 24 image that needs to be 18 by 24 inches for some reason because it's going to teach me something about something. But it's just a JPEG, so what the hell are we doing? And I just thought I could either do that and absolutely ruin any kind of financial prosperity in the future, kind of like what I'm doing right now, and make it so that I will be in debt forever. Or I could work a job and I could work on my comics, which was just the only thing I was caring about at the time. I'm mixing up timelines here, but you see, I was very nervous to do this thing. It's very strange. I hate talking to a camera, but I feel like I want to show that this is a very possible medium of practice to live in and do. So I didn't go to art school. I got accepted, and I found a roommate who was also going to the same school, who I became friends with, and we found this apartment. This apartment, and I'm still here. And then I decided around July of the 1 month before I was supposed to go to college that it was no good for me, and I just want to make comics. And I've got all this money that I'm not going to waste on a college deposit, and I'm just going to use to spend my rent, and then work a job and save money so I can keep printing my comics, because I really wanted to do this. And so that's when I really made HORNRIM 1. And this was made for about 17 people who bought it, who knew me from high school, or family member. My mom bought it. My dad bought one. This is the same house why you're buying two, but they really, they were very supportive people at the time. And this was sold on Etsy.com, and nobody gave a fuck. And then I made this one, and I really, this is the time I was living in Philadelphia, and I was just sitting on the subway so many times thinking, my God, I'd finally discovered Crumb. I'd finally discovered 8-Ball. These are pamphlet comics. I was thinking, man, I really just wish people were publishing this stuff. In my stupid mind at the time, all I knew was Jerk Factor from Bone, and academic graphic novels like Mouse. I mean, God bless, love Mouse, but geez, what's a 12-year-old gonna do with that information as far as exploring what they could do in comics? And in high school, they made this graduate. I made a cover for the graduation pamphlet, and I thought, wow, this would be really cool if, like, instead of it up and seeing all the quotes from the parents who actually love their children, it was comics instead. And so I thought that I would do a monthly time capsule for myself and of comics every single month. I was like, let me just do 20 pages of comics and put it in a thing like this, just like Crumb did. And I had no comic friends at the time that I was completely unaware of anything small press. And then I moved to Philadelphia with my art school friend who went to the art school, and I dropped out. And then he told me about something very beautiful. Told me about Smoke Signal, and I saw the Cowboy Hank comic for the first time, and I was really excited by that, and made this, and then I made a second issue of this one, which I don't have here because I've switched computer rooms, and I made this. Nobody gave a fuck about this either, but I just thought that if I just worked a job and just kept on making these small time capsules for myself, that I would feel completely happy. And I thought I'd reached nirvana just by like having both of these in existence. And for those who don't know, HORNRIM was a one-man anthology comic that was just complete ripoff of Zap, complete ripoff of 8 Ball. I was just making like 2 or 3 page stories about stupid shit. I was just complaining about the problems of my life emotionally and putting them into characters and maybe not so nuanced ways. This is the first Alanzo Sneak comic I ever made. I was just, these were just drawn in my sketchbook over the summer of the pandemic when I had finally taken into my own hands the ambition to make comics, finally, because I'd made them in elementary school, and I made them in middle school, and then I got discouraged, and then I wanted to be cool, and I wanted to be in a band in high school, and so I stopped. And then right after high school and the pandemic hit, I was just, full throttle. This was in my mind for months, this cover. Just this object, the fact that I'm even holding it still, I'm very happy that I made this. In my mind, I was happy to print these at home on newsprint that I was in complete control of. This was printed right here with this printer in 2020. And I was just happy with, making them, throwing them on porches, giving them to my 3 friends that I have, and living a life where I work a job and I just make these scenes forever. And I kept on doing them. I really stuck to this obsession of like, well, now that I know that I can make comics, I'm really just going to keep on going. Because every time it got a little bit easier, when I was working on this, it was just like, to make 1 page was just like, geez, I would just think, how do people do this? It's so much work. But I loved it so much, but I was discouraged with the reality of time, and I hated the work so badly. I thought it was going to be really good, and then it's printed out and it's stapled, and after hours and days and weeks of like figuring out how to print this myself without it being fucked, really was like, wow, it finally exists, but I'll probably never make one again. It kind of took everything out of me. And I felt very discouraged, but I just kept on doing them. In my sketchbooks, I was just drawing in my sketchbook before I was making real comics like this in high school. And by the time I was making comics like this, I had no interest in working in sketchbooks because I was just, anytime I wanted to draw something, I just made it into a comic because it was just this most beautiful therapeutic practice for me. Then I made HORNRIM 3, and this is magazine size, and I was still very obsessed with Robert Crumb and Daniel Klaus, and I was getting obsessed with 80s manga at the time, like Shinobu Kaze and Astro Boy. And I was just finding a lot of peace in making these comics. They were very personal, and I was just starting to sell more of them. You know, it went from 17 copies to like 50 copies. So I was just posting it on Instagram. And, you know, I live in a generation where you can be somebody in high school and have maybe like 1,000 followers just because you just, in high school, you just follow everybody you know. And I had some sort of digital platform from just, you know, existing as a Generation Z person in 2020. And, you know, I would just post my comic pages and I would say where to buy them. And I would just sell them and ship them from here. But it went from 17 copies to like maybe 50 copies. By this one, maybe 100 copies. And, you know, I was sending them to people for free, you know, like people just like all the time. Anybody I admired, I was finding comics every day, new comics every day from the internet. You know, even though I wasn't from the Tumblr generation, I was like, I discovered that stuff, you know, after the fact and was really just fired up. And I was working as a caricature artist at the zoo because of the company that I worked with in Allentown, Pennsylvania, Commons Art Shops. You know, they have many locations where they are the monopoly caricature artist slash body art slash face paint slash airbrush t-shirt conglomerate. And they uh, gave me a job at the Philadelphia Zoo because I worked at Dorney Park for about four or 5 years from 2016 to 2020. And I would I just forgot what I was saying. Yeah. Geez, you know, this is a real trip talking to people like this. Never done something like this. But I was I was working as a caricature artist and I was putting out these comics, and then I decided to put out more comics after that. I put out Alanzo Sneak, and that was about 32 pages because I was getting really tired of working in a one-man anthology format. I started to feel like it was really one-dimensional. Like if Larry David and Jerry Seinfeld are writing an episode of Seinfeld, they're not gonna just like write a whole new show for anytime they want to be in an airport. They just put their characters in an airport. And I thought that was a really beautiful thing. I was getting really tired of coming up with new characters every single time, and for new stories and stuff like that. You know, I feel like cartoonists like Josh Penger really made a good example of doing that with Goiter and new characters every time kind of thing. And I just completely was disgusted by that, and I just kept on drawing these cowboy character that I was drawing sneakers in my sketchbooks all the time. I was drawing, and I just kept on making comics with him, and I felt familiarity, and it just kept on growing, and I could find out that I could do a million different stories in the same world. And I found a beauty in that I still indulge in today. I made Muscle Horse, and by this point, I was starting to post comics on the internet, like swipe comics, like Alex Graham style swipe comics, you know, Simon Hanselman style, like you know, 10 pictures on the website of Instagram.com, and you read them periodically, like they're serialized in blocks of images. And I was like, wow, this is just like TV. This is just like I could just send all the comics to the digital realm, and it would connect with people. And so I started to do that with all my comics I ever made. And I was like, you know what? Fuck this. I don't care if it's like not pure anymore, because I was a purist in the sense that I wanted to print all my comics at home. And if anybody read my comics, I wanted them to read them from a book, because I was really upset with you know, all of these Instagram artists that are just like posting like Bart Simpson transgender Spider-Man and getting 1 million likes. And I just thought, wow, that's real lame. But if they really want to get the goods, they're gonna have to buy it on paper, because you know I stand with paper. And I was really like highfalutin about all that. But I just thought, you know what, fuck it, I'm just gonna post it all on the internet. And I did. I posted Alanzo Sneak, and I posted HORNRIM comics, and I posted Muscle Horse, which was the new comic I was working on at the time in 2021. And I had sent all my comics to Simon Hanselman, and then we became friends over the interwebs. And he started to share all of my work on Instagram. And, you know, I went from like 2,000 followers to like maybe like 7,000. And then it just got bigger, and people were liking them, and they were following along to the pages on the internet. And I was just like, wow, this is like, people are really invested in the work. And I started to get more sales on the comics. Like when this finally came out after being serialized on the internet, it was like my PayPal got shut down, and I had to tell my PayPal about who like what I did, and it was a very surreal experience, and people started to know me when I would go to like a house show in Philadelphia. Because here's the thing: all my friends from high school in Allentown, Pennsylvania, they grew up and they went to Temple University, which is in Philadelphia, and all of them. I would never talk to them in high school, and then I go to the show where I'm playing with my band, and they like they're like, oh, like the horse cock guy. Oh, that's you. Oh, the you drew a comic where you put a police officer having sex with a pierogi. Wow, that's you. Wow. And so I had a new kind of uh, visibility with this work that I was so obsessed with, as if millions of people were seeing it, but I was just making it for myself. And then people were looking at it like for real. And I didn't really think that would be something that I would experience in real life, like someone saying that to me. So I started to meet people, um, and that was really strange. And I just thought, well, this must be how people make audiences nowadays. So I'm just going to keep posting my comics on the internet. And I kept on doing that. And then I made Gecko, which was another comic that I posted on the internet, but I drew. Here's the thing about drawing comics for the internet. I think about it like television, but I don't think about any kind of backlash or any kind of engagement from these people. Because if you start to make your comics thinking about the digital format, then when you read them in the format that it is immortal, you completely can tell that it's made for something and that it's sacrificed in quality for technology. I've never sacrificed my comics for technology, and I never will. I will always draw my comics by hand. I will never draw them with an iPad, and I will always draw my comics first before I post them on the internet, which is what I did with this. I just the way that I write comics um, is like I will think of an idea and I will write it down on a small piece of paper. And sometimes these are ripped pieces of paper, and they gather up on my table. And I like to think of them as socks. This is like this method that I have called the sock method, where I come up with all of these ideas. You see, and these ideas are like socks on a bed after you do your laundry, and you have to then match the socks. But the only way to match the socks is by putting them on the bed, and you just think of an idea and you write it down. Any idea, no matter what it could be. And the more comics that you make, the more that you'll be able to just not really care if it's a bad idea, because you learn that execution is really what matters. And this soft method that I have was um, I would just write down an idea, and then I would lay them on my table. Then I would take a piece of computer paper and I would write down the ideas on the computer paper, scattered on the page, and I would leave it for a week, and I would keep looking at it, and your mind starts to make connections on its own, and it starts to tell stories with these anecdotes and these ideas, and maybe it's ideas of what you want to draw, or maybe it's ideas of things that can happen to these characters. And I've done it so many times with these characters in my Alanzo Sneak comics that now they've just completely taken a life of their own, and I can put them in any situation, and I really have so many comics to make, and this method has helped me a lot, because I used to be really afraid of the ideas being bad. But really, the truth about creating art is that there are no bad ideas. It's just bad execution. You can turn anything, any sentence of something that could be an idea for a piece of art, and turn it into a beautiful object, or a story, or painting, or anything. And what determines its quality is how it's executed. And I've never talked this long without someone speaking. I mean, this is a crazy, you
Well,
know.
you're doing great, Nate. So look, you've already surpassed your limits, and so I think you deserve a break. No, but
Well,
that's great.
If I could properly verbalize how I do these comics, I wouldn't make comics. I would publish them. I would make a bunch of money off of stupid idiot cartoonists that don't know how to form sentences. I would make millions of dollars if I knew how to verbalize what the fuck that I do all the time. Uh, I mean, I just don't really know. I mean, this is just me, you know. But I had notes and then I lost the notes and then I moved rooms from the computer and
No, you're doing
and
great. No, that's all wonderful. Thank you so much for sharing all of that. I think the stuff that you made based on your teacher's life is really fascinating. I think like it's one of those things where I mean clearly that teacher, I mean, it must have, I don't know if she just had poor boundaries or if she really saw something in you she wanted to cultivate or both, but in either way, I mean, certainly I think that person had a great impact and there's a lot of lessons to be learned about how to like just kind of nurture people and let them like pursue the things that they're good at and interested in doing. I wanted to ask you a couple of questions. One thing that you mentioned was you were talking about how, especially because you were moving around a lot, you got a lot out of the stories you were drawing. You said earlier, like drawing a vacation to Hawaii was as pleasurable as going to Hawaii. Like it activated that like level of pleasure and excitement for you. Whereas like the comics you're making now, the things that you're putting your characters through aren't always as pleasant as a trip to Hawaii. It's not something you do, out of necessarily out of like wish fulfillment or something. But do you feel like you're as connected to like personally connected or getting like, fulfilling something for yourself in the types of narratives you're doing now, but in a different way?
yes, completely. All my comics are so autobiographical. These comics are so strange because they've brought people into my life and taken them out of my life, and they've predicted strange things, and they've prophesized weird like small subtle nuances of my life that I just it's like the chicken or the egg. You don't know which came first. It's like the comic or my life, and I have such a deep I channel everything, every human experience into my comics from my life, and like it's kind of like the only it's the stereotypical conversation about comics as therapy. It's like when you create a comic about something that has happened to you that doesn't sit well with you in the 3D reality realm. It's like if you make a comic about that, say your dog gets taken away by your roommate and cooked in an oven, if you were to make a comic about that, you would think about the comic more than the experience because to make the comic takes so much time and you process it. And even if the comic turns out to be that it's like a sci fi adventure comic about a dog who gets blown up by a rocket ship, it's like still so exactly close when the person who experienced it looks at it and they think of the comic instead of the life tragedy and traumatic experiences that can bog down people in their life and make them lose it. People can really lose it if they don't have anything to escape to. And so I've graduated from like I'm bored and I have no friends to I don't know how to deal with this. So I'm creating fiction where I can explore different pathways and properly navigate it. It's like, I feel like I'm a really broken person and like I feel like a broken light bulb of a person. And it's like, a light bulb's one of those things, if it breaks, you really can't glue that shit together. But like I found the super glue of comics where I can, glue myself back together different ways and find new meaning from these things and replace horrible emotions and confusion about being on this earth. And it's like, it's never been more personal, you know.
Um, I thought it was interesting too, like you mentioned that you needed to find permission to make short form work, which I think is really interesting too, because I do kind of feel like, in a way, I've been really happy to see, I shouldn't just say in a way, I mean, I've just been happy to see a lot of people basically just making comic books again. I think I think you were quite right that even cartoonists, not just kids, for quite a few years thought of the graphic novel as like the ultimate form, like this is the goal, both because I think it represented a kind of achievement, like a measurable kind of achievement, like, okay, you've done the long story, you've run a marathon, and also too, which I think is still true, is that, to the extent that there is a possibility of an artist getting sort of well compensated for making a comic, it's more likely to be for doing a graphic novel, than for making a comic book. So there's like a financial incentive, there's a kind of self-esteem element and a prestige element. And, at the same time, I remember like, seeing, your work and Goiter and some of these other comic books that were coming up, and seeing both in terms of form and also in some ways in terms of the kind of storytelling, it felt like people were sort of looking back at a pre-graphic novel period, like looking back at things like Eight Ball and Hate and Dirty Plot and stuff like that. And you've described your path a little bit, how finding Zaps actually was and Eight Ball was very important to you in that regard. And I do think that's interesting. And at the same time, too, you mentioned Simon before, and he's someone who does started out doing short form stuff, still does short form stuff, but also is like built those characters into something that can sustain a long narrative too. I don't know if that's even a question exactly, but do you feel like you just have no desire to do a long form narrative, or at this point now that you've kind of worked things out, could you see yourself getting, doing something like that one day too, with these characters or with different characters?
Yeah, well, I definitely wouldn't think I'd work things out, you know. I'm like completely still confused and working, but I find that the limitations of working with the same characters gives me so much freedom to explore this confusion and grow. And I do feel that I like I think there's a lovableness that comes with repeated characters in both the person who's creating them and who's reading them. It's like Scooby Doo characters is like you can name all of them and you kind of love all of them if you grew up watching them. And I'm trying to do like Scooby Doo meets Love and Rockets, where it's like a long experience that the reader gets to be rewarded from uh, long term reading, but is also completely entertained from just I found this comic. Let me just read this one. You know, all of my comics are completely narrative. Like there's no like stagnantness. Like every single one is an event from the previous. Like this takes place about like 2 months after this comic, and this comic is 1 month before this comic. You know, it's like every and if you read them, you'll be able to find out that I'm not just saying these things like there are things that happen each comic that couldn't have been talked about in the previous one had they not been connected. So I think subconsciously in a very long term form, but in the context of a product, in the context of the artistic transportation of what I'm doing, I think of them in short bursts in episodic magazine format. You know, I feel like with Flippy here, here. With my newest book, Flippy, I do feel like I've entered season 2 of these characters' lives, you know, and I do hate to use television vernacular. However, I don't really believe in also subscribing to that the television vernacular can only be used for television media. I think that television vernacular works really well with any kind of serialized episodic uh, story mediums, and so I think of Flippy as season two's breakthrough story. And when I do these comics, it's just like a 48 page comic, and it's they've got 5 episodes inside of it, and these are all things that I've made like consciously knowing the whole story of this book, but I am able to complete them in short bursts and you know not fuck myself over by putting it to be continued at the end of a book and then never doing it. Everything is complete, but everything is together at the same time. You know.
No, that makes sense. It feels like the rhythm of life too,
Yeah, in life you think of things like, oh, that was the era of when I lived in that shitty apartment, or like that was when I was dating so and so, or that was when I was like working this job. You think of life in cartoony ways.
Yeah. I want to ask you another question. We were chatting a little bit before the talk, and you were talking about your relationship to the characters, and it reminded me of something that years ago, I mean, Chris Ware talked about how a lot of his characters would start out as these like very like one-dimensional comedy characters, but then like once he started working with them, he would feel like he needed to figure out what their actual perspective was, and that's when they started to become like more multi-dimensional characters for him, and he started to like, so he'd start creating these characters almost like as objects of fun, and then eventually would end up having like empathy for the characters and treating them, more like, three-dimensional beings. Yeah, how is you created these characters, as you said, it was a useful thing to be able to go back to the same cast of characters like your Scooby-Doo gang and kind of put them into different situations and see how they respond to it. How has your thinking about those characters and the way you approach them evolved over the time you've been working with them?
Well, when I first started out doing these characters in the Alanzo Sneak comics, it was completely like, as you said, like just for comedic relief, And the iconography of cowboy comics was so deeply ingrained in my psyche because of Toy Story, and I was watching, all sorts of animated films that were coming out when I was a child, and these comics, they gave me a really new feeling of just like constant friendship and community, and it's like strange, familiar, like I don't know, like think like I don't know, just the repetition of it was just really alluring, and every time I went back to it, it was this crazy feeling, and it enabled more and more stories, and my life started to like enable the way I was making these comics, and I found that I could be invincible in a way by just channeling it all into my practice, and I had found success in selling them, and um, I just was like, well, I had a psychedelic experience on psychedelic drugs, and I went on a walk, and I came back into my room, and I saw my life completely objectively, and all of these. I thought I was completely wasting my life doing these comics, and um, I was just looking at the original paintings and the covers and the pages, and it started to feel so fake to me, and I'm just like, wow, I've completely missed out on my youth and my life, and I've pushed away people in my life, and I've chosen comics over people in my life, and I believed in it all so much until this experience, and I walked back into my room, and I was just like, you're so fake, like these characters are so fake, like it's just me. And then I was working on this comic here for the new issue of Smoke Signal, where I am exploring the feelings of fear and the rational and irrational consequences of fear, and it's like living with fear and being one with fear, and not necessarily being stupid about avoiding things in your life because of just the fear of insert here, like anything. But I was, I was working on this comic and I just ate some mushrooms and I was trying to work on it, and these characters were just screaming at me. Huff Dealey was screaming at me, the dog, and he was like trying to tell me to kill myself and to, jump off the Schuylkill River. And like he was like speaking all of this truth that I was writing in this comic about fear. And if it just felt like I was losing my mind, and maybe I did, but it's like the characters then revealed to me how real they were. And subconsciously, as I was working on this comic, Flippy, I was telling the story from multiple protagonists' point of view in sort of a documentary fashion where the reader has to like make up their own reality out of this. And I think that that's how people live their lives, especially in New York. I mean, people in New York, you've got a lot of friends walking around with you, and you got a lot of different people's stories and drama and confusion, and you have to kind of make up your own world. And so that is something that I've come to realize here. But most of all, that what I've realized is that these characters are very real to me. They are extensions of every facet of myself, but also they are like not, they've forced themselves against my will to be the complete focus of my journey of life. And I just I don't know what else to say.
Okay, wow, that's really powerful, and thank you for sharing that. And I guess a related question, Jasper Krentz posted a question in the chat. You were talking about processing your life in your comics, and Jasper asks, do you ever think processing your life in a comic just prolongs whatever pain you're dealing with at that time?
This is an interesting question because I know that Jasper Krentz processes his life through the Magnet Head comics and the Dan Secret comics where he gets a concussion. But it's like if you're working on a comic about getting a concussion, it's like when the concussion is cured, you're not still working, you're not still dealing with it. I'm kidding, Jasper. But no, I don't think so. I think that it completely brings you to an objective standpoint of whatever you're dealing with. And it it separates you from the experience, and it separates any kind of dread that is existing in that experience. And like it's like when you say like it's like when you're like, I'm really scared to draw to talk at the comic symposium. I'm really bad at talking to a camera. I hate my life, I hate myself. But then it's like, well, if you just say that, then you feel better about it. You know what I'm saying? Like when you bring it out of your mind hellscape, you feel better about it. And so I think that comics is the ultimate version of that practice.
Mm-hmm. Let's see. So there are a few more questions in the chat.
Yeah, anybody that wants to ask a question, please, feel free to talk to me. I've been talking to a spaceship box for about an hour. Oh, Heath Huston, Cycle Cleveland, good job on showing your Plum Pocket on the screen. My God, that looks beautiful. Thanks for showing that off. Anybody that wants to ask a question, just unmute yourself. Like, yes, I'd love to hear a voice. But I love the Bill Carter Octopus voice more than anything.
Yeah, thanks a lot. Except for Jiminy Glick's voice. Let me ask Austin, do you want to ask your question out loud? Do you mind, or should I go ahead and read it?
Oh, well, Austin, I'd love to hear you.
Okay, Austin saying I can read it. That's fine. So, well, earlier you had said, there are no bad ideas, there's just bad execution. And Austin was interested in hearing, like, what is bad execution to you? Like, what is your sense of what constitutes good or bad execution in a comic?
Wow, that's a really good question, Austin. I think that bad execution is overindulging in the things that makes you happy to draw a comic and completely erasing the reader from your mind in a deconstructive way. So it's like if you are working on a comic and you're working on an autobiography comic, say you're an autobiography cartoonist, say you never wrote fiction in your life, and you're making a comic about how you were on a dating app, and someone on the dating app said to you that oh, I love the pictures of your dog. Please send me a picture of your dog. But the comic is about how you kill the person from the dating app, and you put in the section about the dog, and it has nothing to do with the story. To me, that's bad execution because you are just indulging in things that don't matter, and you are just you're taking all of the wrong things from what is inspiring you. I think bad execution is just like if you've just completely lost any kind of consciousness of it being readable or it being outside of just your own masturbatory practice.
Adam Kane is raised a hand. Adam, can you unmute and ask a question?
Is that how it works? They got the little hand emoji.
There is a
Oh, hi.
little hand emoji.
There's a little
Wow,
hand.
it's pretty nice to see the person's face.
Hi, Nate. Yeah, just wanted to ask about how you have like balanced, like you were talking about sort of working and then doing comics and kind of, you know, juggling those two things at the same time. And I've found it really hard to not get like swallowed up in my work or really exhausted by it. And I'm curious, like, what you think of as like
Wait, swallowed up in what work? In your day job work or your practice of comics?
mostly, well, it's like one gets sacrificed by the other sometimes. Like if I get really swallowed up in drawing, then my work suffers, and then if I get too into work, I'm currently like I'm teaching right now, and so it's like a really it's the kind of job that swallows up your time if you let it, and I'm trying to find something else. And so
Oh,
I
geez.
what's that?
I said, oh, geez, Adam, you should work at Home Depot, man. So that you
Yeah,
can
see, like that's I've wanted something that's more like passive, but I was just curious, like what you see as like an ideal kind of work, like what's ideal work for a cartoonist to do?
That's a pretty fabulous question. So I would say this. I would say because I my only full time job was working as a caricature artist and working as a hot dog seller, and I did find that my time spent as a hot dog seller, I spent more time working on my comics, and I spent more time thinking about the comics. And I found that working in a place where I'm drawing all day, I am just completely drained of the idea of moving my hand around to create an image. I think that also if you are teaching people about comics, it's like you're kind of and if you don't want to be doing that, you're kind of wasting your artistic economy by like just giving it all away, kind of. By the time you get home, it's like, well, just Uber Eats the goddamn Wingstop and then call it a night and go to sleep. It's like I don't want to work on my. I'm so like emotionally like invested in all these other people. I would say if you don't want to teach, it's like it's gonna be hard to do both, unless you really love teaching and it feeds the comics work. But if you don't, it's like you should work at Home Depot, I think.
Yeah, see, I guess that's
Sell from
like
Home Depot, and then it's like, well, now I've been thinking about my comic all day because Home Depot sucks, so now I can just make the best comics ever made all night long because I'm off work tomorrow.
right. So you have confirmed my suspicions that I should get
Yeah.
something like that. Yeah.
But maybe talk to a therapist. Maybe I'm not the best. I mean, I'm sitting here with a fake version of a character I drew. I mean, acting like it's real. I mean, by the way, I thought this is real to me the whole time. This is not someone you should be taking anything with more than a grain of salt with. But I do believe what I said, so I stand by it.
I appreciate that. Thank you.
Ollie has a hand up. Go ahead, Ollie. You want to go ahead and unmute?
Hello, Ollie. How are you? Ollie is a wonderful cartoonist living in Borum.
Hey Nate.
Where I've spent many times. I've spent times in that room. I've drawn pages of this comic in that room when we were drawing with Floyd, and it was a beautiful time. It's a utopia of comics, no?
Sorry? What?
It's a utopia of comics when we're drawing in that room.
Oh yeah, it's World Comics. So I guess okay, I'll get into the question. When you were saying the question is like where is hope in your comics? And the way I want to get there is you said earlier that you have like a documentary like method style for like Flippy and for other books where like you get to see things, something happens and then you get your own feeling from it, like the audience gets their own feeling from it. And I think like that's something that like really grand storytelling does, like make like landscapes or forms out of feelings. It's like less ego, like you have to like you don't have to become anything to enter it. It's already there. And I guess like I feel like I want to believe that like you are an entirely hopeful, triumphant person, even though some of your comics there might not like each of the episodes might not like end in like a net cheery thing. So yeah, do you think that hope exists in your comics? And if so, where? Or if not, like why?
Oh wow, geez, that's such a beautiful question, Ollie. Thank you for that question. Hope exists in the comics in the way of everything that's happening is almost so absurdly horrible that the reader, if they have any common sense at all, would have to hope that things get better. But in life, when these things are happening to you, I feel like people are not really capable of having an objective point of view on their life. So it's like if like maybe you get fired from like a pizza place, and then your boyfriend breaks up with you, and then it's like you get married, and then you get a divorce, and then your kid dies of cancer. It's like you can never be objective about your life and be like, oh my gosh, I'm so glad I live in a house. I'm so glad I'm not homeless. Even though I'm going through a divorce, it's like I can still get pizza tonight. It's like nobody's thinking like that. So I think that the reader reading these comics, their hope exists in like the beauty of what they're watching anyway. It's like these people's lives in my comics are pretty weird, and like there's beauty in the horror of what's happening all the time. And so the hope I think lies in more of like the reader's interpretation of the work, rather than the direct events that are happening. Yeah.
I also think, even if somebody's depicting, this is just a thought that I could add here, maybe, even if someone's depicting, like horrible situations, there's something just in your ability to present that fully formed idea that's hopeful. I mean, just the act of making the comic successfully is a kind of, I mean, it is a human achievement, and it shows you that whatever the emotions are that you're processing through the work, that we have the ability to do that in a way that can actually be like externalized and communicate with other people. And that's
Yeah.
a very hopeful thing in and of itself.
Completely. People can escape into these. I mean, I feel like people these days, they're so exhausted with the phones. It's like, phones are cool. I could do anything. I love my phone. I love my phone. But then it's like, you're just sitting on your phone and it just sucks, And I think some people really do need that paper escape sometimes. And, one thing that is guaranteed for my comics at all times, I mean, I know it takes a long time to ship. And I know if you sent me an email about Flippy not being in your mailbox, it's because I was waiting for a box of them to arrive from New York, because Austin English had them all, but I was on tour with my band and I couldn't be here to pick them up and ship them to you. And I'm sorry, I'm really sorry, but I want you to know that one thing that's guaranteed from all my comics, if you buy them ever, from till the day I die, is that they're about life. They're about real life. I'm not making comics about a utopia of my cat and me ordering Taco Bell on Uber Eats, and then it's like funny because the cat looks stupid. It's like these are not the comics I make. My comics are about real life and experience and pain and something. You can get something from this, and that's my promise to you.
Yeah, I did want to ask you one question too. This was something that I was thinking about when I was looking at some of your comics, and then I also thought about when you were talking about the sock method. It's one of the things that's kind of interesting about reading your comics is it feels like I mean, this is a simplification, but I reread a few of them before the talk, and it seemed like there were a few kinds of beats that you hit when you have these like big moments in your comics. And sometimes it's just like a big comedy moment, like somebody saying something really funny, or doing something really funny. Sometimes it's an actual emotional moment where somebody's like on the verge of breaking down its tears or something. And
There's a lot of crying in my
a lot of
comics.
crying. That's something I was noticing. And sometimes it's a big like physical comedy kind of gross out thing, like somebody vomiting in someone else's face, or the explosive menstrual blood in Plum Pocket or whatever. Like,
Spoilers.
what's that?
Spoilers.
Yeah. I mean, are there do you think about that as kind of like different, I don't know, like different kind of notes that you hit in your work, or different kind of qualities or characteristics that you have in a certain proportion?
I don't know. I was when you asked me that question, I was curious to hear more about like what you meant by the when it gets to that part of the story, because it's so subconscious to me. Like I create like the sock method, whatever piece of paper with all the ideas, and then from there I'll write down everything that needs to happen, and then from there I'll make the stick figure thumbnail where it's 20 panels on a page, and I just like separate them out. But most of the time my writing is based in like things I wished I said in funny moments in my life where I didn't have enough courage. Because I mean, that's just something I've always struggled with. Like I never really say what I want to say, But sometimes when I do, I get in a lot of trouble, and then it's like people don't talk to me and blah blah blah. But I a lot of it's based off of things I wish I said, and then like sitcom pacing. Because I grew up, I watched Alf all the time. I had season 1 of Alf. It's my favorite show. I think he's so funny. I wish Alf as my friend. I love Alf so much. I want to sleep with Alf in my bed. And then Full House. You get the clean cut like completely censored like family life talk. Like they'll never talk about anything crazy because it's Full House. And then I got like How I Met Your Mother, where it's like completely raunchy. I've watched all 9 seasons of How I Met Your Mother like 3 times when I was working on each book. It's just like my comfort food television programming that I do when I'm inking and I just want to escape from life. So any kind of like weird pacing comedy bullshit comes from like the combination of those 3 things I've just listed.
Let's see. There's couple of more questions.
Wait. Also, Bill K, are you in a time machine, man? I've been really wondering, where are you? What is this? Who are those people behind you? They keep looking at this. The one just walked
where
away.
am I?
Who's
Oh
that?
no, yeah, I'm at school actually. I'm at Parsons where I teach, because I had to teach until 6:40, and it seemed to be easier to just do the Zoom call in a conference room I could reserve, instead of just trying to run home and do it there. Yeah, so that's the faculty office behind me.
Wow, it's so crazy. Is that like is there like a big TV above you? Is that what you're
Yeah, I'm
seeing?
looking at a giant television mounted on the wall. That's why it's like this bird's eye view of me, because the camera is on top
So
of the screen.
strange.
So
Wow.
yeah, yeah,
I was just curious, I was just wondering.
yeah. Yeah, I'm at the CERN Super Collider. Let's see. So we got some more questions. Cycle Cleveland writes, Nate, I've seen Alex Graham, who is with us, for some
Oh,
time.
Alex is watching this right now. Alex Graham's watching this.
Alex Graham's here right now.
Wow, great. Hi,
Cycle Cleveland asks, I've seen Alex Graham refer to the idea of accessing the source, and David Lynch talks about being able to access the sea of creativity through transcendental meditation. Is there something you do that you find helps the ideas flow, a mindset you try to cultivate, or an environment that allows the creative juice to flow?
Absolutely. Anytime I'm feeling bitter, and I'm telling you, I feel bitter a lot, I write it down. I write down everything. I write down if I'm upset about something and somebody said to me 6 months ago. I write down something about something I wish I said 3 months ago. I will write it down all the time, because to me, these feelings are like I'm capturing like a butterfly in a net of reality, of like real, true human feeling. And I write it down and I apply it to my characters, and I apply it to the stories that I write. And I smoke weed when I draw. Sometimes when I ink, and that helps to alleviate any kind of dread of the reality of like, well, my rent is due in 6 weeks or 6 days and I don't have any money. Well, I can focus on this comic and then I won't be worried about that. I I watch a lot of TV sometimes, older TV. I try to stay off of the Instagram Reels. I mean, that shit's for fucking babies. But I just try to be present in the stories that I'm working on because I'm always working on some. And I found that when I wasn't present with my characters, when I was kind of autopilot with the stories I'm telling, the work kind of suffered in a way, and it was harder for me to pool things that were very easily poolable before. And it's just another one of those examples of just like, well, I wasn't taking these characters, like, they've forced themselves upon me, and I've just like, I make them a priority in my life, whether it pushes people away or not. It's hard to explain what you do to other people that don't do what you do, but it's like if you're like this person in the group chat of text messages where you're like, well, I don't want to go to the party, I'm sorry, I'm working on my comics right now, or I'm not going to go hang out right now, sorry, I'm working on my comics right now. It's like, oh, they're just like, oh, you never hang out, blah blah blah, you're working on these comics. But then they see the comic and they're just like, man, oh man, I've been trying to do something like this. Like, I've been trying to start a record label, man. Like, I've been trying to start like a fashion. It's like cool, but it's like you were at the party, It's like I was staying home because I just like need to do this, And they never get to really see the what goes into it until after the fact.
You've said a couple times these characters force themselves on you. I mean, and I sort of understand what you mean, but I also, someone could look at that objectively and say like, well, tomorrow you could decide to never do another Alanzo Sneak comic if you wanted to. That's your choice. But it sounds like you feel like that's not a choice anymore.
Yeah, I guess I'm just so deep into it. I guess it's just like I spend so much time with these fake characters but they're not fake, they're real, they have lives, blah blah blah. But I think each comic I do, it just like reveals an even deeper pit of something undiscovered that needs more action to be discovered. So it's like I'm talking in these kind of like grandiose, like philosophical, blah blah blah, psychedelic ways, but it's grounded in the reality of just how much time I've really spent drawing stories of these characters that just so happen to be very related to my personal life.
Yeah.
And it would be really stupid to quit because I've just gotten an audience of people who have reliably bought these comics every single time, and every month or so more people are reading them.
It sounds like the characters are productive for you and you've invested enough in them that it's starting to like build its own momentum, and there's like a thread for you to keep pulling and it's going to lead somewhere.
Yeah, I mean, even if it was like I was working at the Knockbox Cafe coffee shop and it was like, well, I was working on these comics for like 17 people again, just like it was with the first one. I really, honestly, truly would not change anything about what comics I'm making. It's all the same, whether people are getting them into them or not. And like, I've never benefited from being apologetic in the way I tell a story. I've only suffered. So it's like, I've just completely put it all on the page, and it channels itself the way it does. And, I endorse all people that are hearing this and thinking I don't make any sense to just read them. And if you find enjoyment from them, keep reading them, but, verbalizing is a struggle. But I do feel truly to what I'm saying to be so true inside of my soul.
Sam Edwards has a hand up. Sam, can you go ahead and ask your question?
Hi,
Nate, I
Sam.
wanted to ask about, how's it going? I talked to you about the comic Hepcats recently. And I wanted to ask about like the role of funny animals and the way you mix in animal characters with human characters.
Oh, yeah. Totally, man. I am very obsessed with funny animal comics, dating back to the 1940s with my favorite cartoonist in the whole wide world, Al Fago, who did Frisky Fables. And I mean, you could tell completely. The inspiration is very similar, you know. But funny animal comics are a beautiful thing to me because the ones in the 1940s, they don't really involve people, but I get very bored with human characters, but sometimes it's necessary for some of the characters to be human. And I think the relationship between human characters and anthropomorphic animal characters is like it puts life in the same it puts life and nature in the same viewing uh, lens. You know, it's like I can. It doesn't matter what race or what gender or what anything this character is. They're an animal. They're a dog. They're a horse, and it's like completely objective at that point, and you can just see the soul of who the person is, and the way the story, um, you know, translates into that. But I don't know. I think it's like it's the same thing with like when Casper the Ghost was really big. It's like it's really nice to just have a character who's just like not a human. Timmy the Timid Ghost by Al Fago did this before Casper, and it was a beautiful thing because it's just it's just like this like soul. You're not worried about who or what, especially in the 40s when people were very racist. I mean, Timmy the Timid Ghost came out in the 40s, and you have to think a 10-year-old kid who is a ghost means that he died in the past few years, and it's the 1940s. I mean, he probably died from some horribly racist Holocaust-related events, and these are characters that it's like you can completely look at them objectively and see them like just on what they do and what they feel, and you can project yourself onto them really freely.
Do you think it's easier to empathize with a funny animal character compared to a human one? Like, at least in Flippy, I think we're more disposed to be against Murray, and then but we take the dog character artist kind of in stride.
Yeah, I think it's definitely easier to project onto an animal character. I mean, I think somebody who does this masterfully is Alex Graham with Devil's Grin. Right. These comics, which I did a pinup for in the last issue, in the third issue here. But I think she does this really well, especially with Dog Biscuits, because Dog Biscuits was really focused on the pandemic era and like people's like problems with racism in this country and horrible acts of violence and unfairness. And I think the animals created a kind of like neutrality to and separation into the fiction realm where it's like these people can experience what's happening in the real world and kind of come to terms with it in a strange way because of them being animals and not people. Because you see this character and you're like, oh, that looks like somebody I know. You see this character and it's like, I feel how this character feels. Like, you're not thinking about how they look. I think humans are disgusting creatures, and I think drawing them is even worse. And sometimes when it's just animals, it can be pure in a way where you can say anything and be completely honest.
Right. Thanks, man.
Yeah, thank you, Sam. Nice to see your face.
Good to see you, man.
You also have, one of the things that's interesting about your work too, is you kind of play with the tension between anthropomorphic characters and animal characters. Like in Gecko, you've got actual lizards and anthropomorphic lizard people, and sort of, it almost creates like a sense that like, I mean, it's this very ambiguous dynamic, where the animal is an animal, but the anthropomorphic is something else. And then also you have all of these, horse people, the kind of anthropomorphic horses, but then you have Sheena, who's an actual horse, which is a little bit like Mickey Mouse having a dog, but you introduce the human characters too. So it's this weird, almost like three species or something coexisting. And how do you think of that dynamic? And also the relationship between Sheena and Alanzo is kind of odd. And when you've got the anthropomorphic horse like Peggy, that's one thing, but then Sheena is a real horse. Like, How do you think about those relationship dynamics in your work?
Well, I'd like to quick, give a spoiler away, because quite honestly, anybody that's in this chat at this point is somebody who's seems to be quite invested, So thanks for watching. But Sheena and Peggy are sisters, and this will be revealed in the next comics to come. But I really like to explore the silent animal-based animal-based life form that's not able to speak words but to express themselves. I think just in a pure comedic sense that's a really strong tool to have in a cast of characters, because a silent character can do a face that makes the reader feel what's not being said in a new way. And I also have drawn other animals that are not necessarily speaking human-like. I mean, any kind of animal character that's speaking like a human and walking like a human, looks like a human, is just my fill-in for a human. But when Alonzo steps on the gecko in this comic, there's a real connection between Sheena and the dead gecko, of just that they can't really speak about what just happened, but he stepped on the gecko and smeared blood all around the sand and killed the gecko. And I think that in storytelling, it's important to have characters who can't speak for themselves, because the reader can relate to them in a way, because the reader is silent in the comic. And there's an innocence that comes with a character that doesn't necessarily speak words. And Sheena and Alanzo, they have a very romantic, familial mother and son, but boyfriend and girlfriend relationship. And if you read the comics, it's the only way that you can really know that. Otherwise, you just see a very stereotypical archetype of a cowboy and his horse. But really, it's like, I put a lot of stuff into that is hard to verbalize, but it's like very, very true,
There's another question in the chat from Generoso Fierro. Thanks for your talk, Nate. Generoso writes, my high school art teacher at Creative and Performing Arts in Philly, Phil Sumter, loves cowboys as you do. He draws, paints, and sculpts them all over the city. Curious if you've ever seen his work or crossed paths. Have you seen Phil Sumter's cowboy work in Philly or met Phil Sumter?
I would need some more information on what this looks like, really. Okay. Is it a cowboy or it's like a robot, kind of? I've seen ones where it's like a robot cowboy. I've seen a lot of shit in this city, It's just a lot of people thinking that the next Andre the Giant, Obey, Shepard Fairey, they really think they're the next ones, and it's just a failure every time. It's just so pathetic. It's pathetic. It's fake cutty. It's lame. But I haven't seen this cowboy that you speak of. I'm sure it's cool, though. I'm not going to be mean
about it. Does anybody else want to ask a question? Oh, well, yes. Here's a good concluding question if there are no others. Julian.
Oh, come on, you people gotta have some questions, man. You gotta have some questions. This has been a convoluted chat. Come on.
Okay. Julian, long story short, asks, Nate, where can I buy your comics?
Oh, you can buy my comics at most independent comic book seller stores in the USA, and some in the Commonwealth areas of this universe, like Gosh Comics sometimes. But you can buy them really from nategarcia.bigcartel.com, where I sell every comic that comes out. Right now, you can buy Flippy right now, because I have a bunch of copies left. But I'm halfway sold out through my print run of what I have, 500 copies of this book. Sold almost 1,000 so far. So if you wanted to ever get a copy, you can buy it now from my nategarcia.bigcartel.com.
Okay. Anastasia Olson asks, Anastasia, do you want to ask this out loud?
That would be cool, you can hear a voice from the question asker. That helps me answer better.
I think that's a no. So I'll read that. Anastasia Olson asks, Can you list 3 things that make a good comic in your opinion?
Oh, cool. Okay. I would say cool drawing, relatable characters, and a cool story. That's what I would say. A story that's not boring. Speaking of which, I think it's a really more than particularly perfect time to talk about what I thought were the best comics of 2023. I would like
All right,
to.
let's get the year-end recap.
Yeah, year-end recap. 2023. That's in the past. Fuck 2023, man. Fuck that year. It's a horrible year. Fuck that year. But we got some good comics out of it.
We got some good
I would like
comics.
to say above anything, anybody saying.
Nate, is this starting to feel a little bit like maybe I wouldn't say this is a manga chat. Maybe it's more of a bande dessinée parlay, you know?
Well, if it's not a manga chat, why would you say that? I mean, manga chat, what's that? I never heard of it.
All right, go ahead with your list. Go ahead. What is it?
So anybody that's talking about their favorite list of the year, they'd be remiss to not put Flippy in there. But I'm not really worried about that. Anybody that's worried about Flippy, we're not talking about that right now. So get that thought, take it right out of your mind. I would like to say the best comics of 2023 were The Devil's Grin, issue 3 by Alex Graham. This is a comic that explores the paradigm of fiction and reality like nothing else I've ever seen. This is a comic that really brings to life so much of subconscious feeling and just real strange emotional navigation in the life of people. And it takes place in the 70s, and it's really great. It's like, it's like a movie from the 70s. It's completely immersive, and it's perfect. Second comic of the year, I would have to say is the best comic of this 2023 list. Would have to be Juliet Calais' Blah, 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 issue 4. I mean, this is a comic that is so personal that I smelled it and I thought that this person was in front of me. It was so personal. And this is a comic that is very autobiographical but completely beautiful and just, can really bring a lot of comfort to a person in mental strife. I think that this comic is great and that people should buy this comic. Juliet Calais, Blah, 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 issue 4, a perfect comic book. And then I would like to say the third comic of 2023 that I would say was the best was something that maybe somebody has not seen before. Tales from Qualia. I don't know if anybody has seen this. This is my friend Elliot Wyatt, who goes by the name Yaxam, Yaxam, on the books. He signs his name as Yaxam. I met him in New York. He moved from New York City to Denver. Back to Denver, I guess, is his home, and he is working on comics there. And people can find him on the website Prismatic Cavern. Please seek these comics out. This is a risographed version of his comic that he gave me personally in real life at a Frog Farm event where I was reading comics to the masses. And I am very obsessed with this artist's work. He creates a beautiful Muppet-esque Fraggle Rock sci-fi universe with laugh-out-loud comedy and beautiful immersive rendering that it just takes you to another world. He is an incredible draftsman. I believe he's under the age of 25. I'm 21, but I can still have a lot of weight in valuing the youngness of a masterful cartoonist, which I would have to say is Elliot Wyatt, aka Yaxam. Go to prismaticcavern.com. There's no other way. He doesn't have Instagram. He's very, very cutty with it. He ain't posting nothing. He doesn't have Instagram. He says fuck that. His comics were available in Desert Island, but this is the collection of like about 4 zines he did, like photocopied, like on pink, blue, and green paper, photocopied things as a full color cover, beautiful magazine format. People gotta find this Yaxam. This is my dear friend Elliot Wyatt. Bam! That's it. for
All
this
right.
year.
All right. Comics so good that you can throw them around the room and they're gonna bounce right back. As Nate said, for those in New York, I do know that the mini comics for Tales from Kylie are available at Desert Island because I have bought some of those there, but I have not
So
seen.
you know about the Quailiath, right? I think that there's
Yeah.
none left, but you
Oh,
know
okay.
about it.
Yeah, I've got a few of them, the little purple and blue and green minis.
They're so beautiful. I love his comics. I think he's a modern master.
Yeah, yeah. Has a little bit of a Theo Ellsworth kind of quality too for people who know that work. What was like, okay, let's see. I think there was another question. Oh yeah,
And
so Ollie had another question. Ollie, you
yes,
want to ask this question out loud?
people, don't be afraid to go deep and go dark. I mean, go real deep, go real dark. Let's have some deep.
Hey,
Right.
yo, hello.
Hi, Ollie.
All right, so this is my other question. What places do you internalize from your life that are sort of aspirations for your stories?
Oh, emotional experiences, friendship strifes, deep personal friendship strifes, feeling worthless, emotional romantic experiences, all of that stuff, feeling like you've been treated unfair or being unfair to another person, uh, looking at your life objectively and seeing how you feel from each experience and turning it into a comic to help you live life, I would say.
Course.
I mean, just everything, it's just completely everything that happens is worth exploring, I think everything can be a story, you know?
Yeah, well, you were saying like vacations earlier, like to Hawaii.
Oh yeah.
So
Well,
much
yeah,
of Flippy is in this beautiful like desert place.
that's true. I don't live in the place that I draw. Everything I draw, I would like to say all the Alanzo Sneak comics do take place in Los Angeles, in the deserts of Los Angeles, and they will explore outside of that at a further time. But people should know this is not just some made up desert. I'm not a fuckhead. This is like I'm drawing a blank canvas of a landscape for this world to exist in, but it does take place in the real world, and these comics are like, you know, they exist in a strange part of my brain, and I'm going to the desert because it's easy to draw and tell a story, but not always because I'm drawing them from a desert. Does that I feel like that kind of is a misguiding answer from the question that you asked, but I
No,
feel like it's pretty true.
it's wonderful. It's wonderful. Thank you.
One other question I thought of is earlier, when we were talking about your comics, you mentioned that like a lot of your characters do cry, like there are a lot, and even your friends sitting next to you right now has been just dripping with tears the entire time I've been talking to you. But I mean, there is this. It does feel like you've got a few characters like Murray and Huff who are like just like super aggro, but the many of your characters are just like it just seems like they're just very tender under the surface and they're always like um, vulnerable to this kind of eruption of emotion where they kind of can't hold it back anymore. Why do you have a sense of why those kinds of moments of like emotional kind of outpouring punctuate your work repeatedly?
I don't know. I think I'm just really sad. I think I'm just a sad person, and the company of another character crying can really be helpful. I don't know. I just really do find that there's a repetition in my work of these characters crying. I remember, I used to live with cartoonist Josh Pendinger, and he would see me working in these comics, and he would say, he's like, "Mate, it's like everybody's crying. It's like everybody's gonna think you're like some sad sack cartoonist. Like you're just crying all the time." But it's like Tedward's crying too, but he was right. It was excessive, and it's very excessive. But I think I'm an excessive person emotionally but I repress my emotions to the point where I almost can't really cry. And comics gives me the window to the reality of just completely just letting it all out. And I end up drawing my characters crying a lot of the time because I don't see them as weak, but I see them as braver than me to let it all out. And I do have a lot of repressed emotional damage. What do you think about that, Peggy? She's shy.
No, thank you for that. Thank you for that answer. Does anybody else have a question they want to ask? Well,
anybody, don't be afraid. Don't be scared.
Here. Or a comment. If you have more of a comment than a question, that's fine too.
Only time will tell. I see okay. iPhone 6. Damn.
Yeah, listen, iPhone 6 doesn't dial in just for anyone, so I mean, take the compliment. Okay. Oh, okay. Oh yeah, Alex, that's a fantastic question. Do you want to ask out loud?
Alex, no way you're in this.
Alex Graham asks, and this is actually a really great question. Yeah, I feel like we didn't explore this subject enough. What did your teacher think of your comics?
Oh my gosh, she was completely supportive. She was my only friend in school for a long time. She would give me colored pencils. She would buy them buy art supplies at the thrift store for me for very cheap, give them to me as a gift under the table, not in front of the class. She was very supportive of me. She completely enabled any and every artistic desire I would do, no matter how personal or strange or revealing the comics were. I mean, these were comics where it's like, if she had a boyfriend at the time and she saw these comics, it's like, these would be like telling the boyfriend things about her that maybe that she wouldn't be the first to reveal. It's like they're very personal, based on the things that she's telling 5-year-old, 7-year-old children completely, like, freely. And it was like she was completely cool with it. Like, she gave me paper, she enabled it. She stayed in contact with me for years and years. And Facebook Messenger, I was able to get these books because I'm scanning them for something, and I wanted to be able to show them on the comic symposium as well, because I think that they speak to a like consistency in my strange desires. But she's a fan.
Have you ever thought of redoing one of those comics?
I mean, they're pretty much unreadable, but sometimes I do read them and I am able to get something out of them and see like some kind of through line. They're very strange. There's some comics here. I wish that I was able. I didn't. First of all, I didn't want to do a PowerPoint for this because I feel like that's very faux academia. I didn't go to art school, and I don't want to subject anyone else to like a PowerPoint of like, what is comics? And then I show a picture of Nancy. It's like, what is this? That's some bullshit, man. I'll show you Peggy. That's it, and I'll talk to you like it's the 70s and we're on Dick Cavett. But these are just like strange comics with people and animals, and they like sometimes it always ends up being that there's a character that wants to do something crazier than what the protagonist wants, and it's a lot of suffering and like coercion and strange emotional toxicity. I don't know, but it's just been there for a long time. It's just like what makes a story cool, nuance.
Hey, Adam has their hand up, has another question. You can go ahead and unmute, Adam.
Yeah, this is more of just a comment than a question. I just realized, Nate, that we share a page in Slice of Life.
Whoa!
Yeah. So, for context for other people, these are stories by this guy, Uncle Gil, who does Spread Love magazine. And yeah, Nate, I just realized we are both on the same side.
That's really crazy. Spread Love is Spread Love is a beautiful publication that enables cartoonists to make money from Harvey Picar's sort of formula where this man, Uncle Gil, I mean, we don't know his name. Adam, I'm sure you don't know his name.
It's Ben.
Oh, is it Ben? Well,
yeah.
he pays these cartoonists to draw stories from his life. You know, and this is something I've been doing for so long. So it's very, it's like a beautiful circle moment where I'm able to be paid for these things, and I can get $100 for a page, and then I can work on my own comics, and then it's like, you know, a beautiful thing. But that's
make this awkward, but
so it's like an autobiography. Oh, sorry.
Yeah, I'll have to talk to him about that. Thank you for clarifying that. No, just not to stir trouble, but I had wondered about that.
About what?
About payment and stuff, but not to get into all that. But it's he's still. I think it might have to do with who he's working with sometimes. I don't know.
Well, I will say this, and I'm speaking completely objectively. I'm not speaking about any publication in particular. And after this, I'm going to go pee for 30 seconds, and we'll continue. I'm not quitting. But I do want to say this. I want to say, if you are a cartoonist working for other publications and you are not advocating for payment of your services, they will not be given to you. You do have to ask, and you have to fight, because a lot of these publishers, they will not assume that you want to be paid, because, well, why pay you for your work? That's stupid, you know? This is how they think. You must ask. But I will be right back, because I do have to pee. Bye.
Okay, well, I'm not going to set a 30-second stopwatch, but Nate will be joining us again shortly. I know that Anastasia has another question in the chat. Cycle Cleveland is monitoring the stopwatch, but Nate will be with us again shortly. But I think even once Nate's back, we'll be wrapping it up pretty soon. Even with the late start, we're coming up on, it's about 2 hours and 45 minutes. I'm sorry, an hour and 45 minutes since we got started. So thanks to everyone for sticking around for the entirety of this talk. Maybe since we have a moment, I can take this time to say something about the talk that we have next week, or just the general season of the New York Comics and Picture Story Symposium. This is the first talk of the spring semester or the spring season. We've got a lot of really excellent guests, including Lat, the great Malaysian cartoonist Lat, author Kampong Boy, Lee Mars, underground cartoonist Lee Mars, pioneering underground cartoonist, who you may know as the author of The Adventures of Pudge, Girl Blimp, someone who was involved with early feminist comics, Ali Erico, a young cartoonist, and that'll be a live in-person edition of the symposium, and that'll be at Topos in Ridgewood. Who else do we have? We have speaking as our Will Eisner Week event speaker, we're going to have Nicholas Meyer, the author and director of films, including, among others, Star Trek II, The Wrath of Khan. And so that's, you know, pretty exciting. Who'll be joining us. And we've got quite a few others. Severine Bascoer from the editorial team behind Legon Review will be one of our speakers as well. And we've got quite a few other really exciting speakers lined up this season. And next week, we're going to have Michael Fikaris on Silent Army projects, and the Australasian comics scene will be the subject next week. So that's just a little bit of a preview of what we've got coming in the coming weeks and months. Nate, welcome back. We've got a couple of other little questions that have popped up here. Let's see. Okay, Anastasia Olson had a question. In your comic world, this is a bit metaphysical, Nate. In your comic world, if the character gets a fatal blow, would they die or come back like Looney Tunes?
No, they would die. If it's fatal, they would be dead. But it's like I've let things in the stories seem like they're fatal, but not. But I'm not like, in the television show Heroes. Does anybody know that show Heroes from the mid 2000s where they would like kill off a character and then they'd come back? Or like Smallville or like, soap opera, just like a general soap opera. Like, I'm not a big fan of like just losing the audience's trust with the stakes of the lives of these characters. It's like if it's a fatal incident, they're gonna be dead. But most of the time, a seemingly fatal incident would be revealed to be something less high stakes than what I'm implying that it is. For example, in Plum Pocket, where Sheena gets the explosive blood in the water, it's not necessarily blood because she's dead. It's blood because she has her period and she's fainting and she's, having too much fun on her birthday.
Okay. Any other questions from anyone in the audience?
Is there anybody alive out there? Can anybody hear me?
One thing that I'll ask one more, and this was more maybe of a kind of maybe uh I don't know, maybe this is a little trivial, but I noticed, I haven't seen your Horn comics before, and you were showing those covers, and you had a character on the cover of the first one who looked kind of like Murray from Flippy. Is that the same character, or is the kind of teddy boy 60s archetypes just something that you've drawn a lot?
Is there something I was so obsessed with? I was really obsessed with the Teddy Boy late 50s, like John Lennon, 1956. Look that up on Google Images and you'll see kind of visual archetype. I was so obsessed with that in 2020. And I was drawing it all the time, and it just in my sketchbooks, and it never went away. And I saw that image of the cover in my mind, and I just did it. But it's not the same, but it comes from the same place of just pure, like alluring yearning to look like a teddy boy from the 1950s, in the Commonwealth area. Because Murray is a British character in my comics who was born in Blackpool, where the carnival is, and in the northern part of the United Kingdom. And it's always kind of been that archetype in my mind. I don't know why. I guess it's just from loving the Beatles and knowing the history of the Beatles, but it's from the same place. So it's funny that you picked up on that because I noticed that too, that I was repeating images from previous books subconsciously. Same like the barcode in the Mr. Venka comic and the Plum Pocket comic. It's like always been a thing. I guess you just like go through a Rolodex of what inspires you, and you just, sometimes repeat yourself.
And Austin has a perfect maybe final question in the chat. What comic is coming up from you next?
Oh, well, that would have to be Flippy 2. I've told people, I was telling Josh Pettinger about Flippy, and before it was done, as I was working on it, he's like, mate, it's like, you've got to have like a name that's got like enticement to it, like power to it, like Power Wash or something like Flippy, I don't give a shit, what I mean? But, I think that Flippy is all right, and I think Flippy 2 is going to be even better. But I might not even call it Flippy 2. I don't know. I think that there's a lot of, I think it's kind of funny to do that. Like it's like Back to the Future 2 or something. I mean, 2, talk about the most lazy sequel name of all time for everything ever made. They always do that. But I mean, Flippy is part of a 3-chapter story that I'm trying to tell. I didn't want to put to be continued on the end of the first one, but it is to be continued, and there's going to be 2 more books, I should say. Whether they're called Flippy 2 or not, this will be next. But I've been working on right now this comic for Smoke Signal, which will be coming out in the end of February or March. It's got James Tonner, it's got Mikhail Shelkroon, it's got Juliet Clay, it's got Austin English, it's got so many people. And I'm also working on some paintings for this festival, this movie festival. That's also a book fair. Been really obsessed with drawing the hellscape that I live in. You know, traffic lights with snow and buildings with bricks and large trees. So that's what I've been doing.
All right, cool. Oh, actually, I had one other question. You know, you had mentioned in your introduction kind of humorously that you were like a post 9/11 cartoonist because you were born after it, so you don't have a memory of it. But also,
it's a myth.
What's that?
It's a myth.
Yeah. Yeah, I mean, it's like me as a kid trying to like understand what Pearl Harbor was or something. But what also strikes me too though is that you're very much you know, you could say too, like maybe more directly, and you know, I don't know if that would mean anything to you, but you could say that you're like a post-COVID cartoonist in the sense that like your experience of the comic scene is not exactly the same as what it would have been if you had like started making stuff in 2012 or something, where it seemed like in the summers, especially like every few weeks, there's some comics show, you know? I mean, I feel like the way that you've encountered the comic scene is maybe a bit more regional. You're not like going to SPX and going to Short Run and going to Cake and going, you know, it's not exactly, it's been a lot more social media driven. Does that sound right to you?
Yeah, post COVID for sure. There was a period of time where I was like really excited to go table at a comic festival, but I never have. You know, I have tabled at Short Run, and I've tabled. Well, I went to Mocha and I tabled outside of the building of Mocha on the street with Floyd Tangeman, my dear friend in comics, mangaka, is also on the list of 2023. But I never really knew these comics festivals or places to connect with other people who make comics until after the pandemic, when it was revealed to me that these things existed before the pandemic. And you know, I've gone on tour for my comics. I've done readings all across the country just by like asking stores if they would mind if I read a comic for an hour and had people come and buy comics. And I've stayed at some people's houses, and some people across the country, they've said, you know, Nate, like people think you're weird, like that you don't really talk to other people, and you should really make friends with everybody in insert Midwest city here, and so that people don't think that you're weird. But I've always used comics as a way of like not having to deal with other people and to escape from other people, and you know, exploring new locations in traveling with comics has revealed to me that there are some very sensitive people in this world who take it personally that you're not going to be in this next lame anthology, insert anthology name here, you know, and that you're just focusing on your own work. And it's just like, you know, I've been nice to everybody I've met, but my God, some people are strange.
Yeah, well, definitely the pandemic kind of shook up a lot of the structures within which people in comics both socialized and distributed and sort of got the word out about their work, which were often the same thing. And it seems like you've just been able to find your own way, doing it in a way that makes sense to you, which I think is very good and healthy. That you know you're able to get the work out there without necessarily, as you say, having to participate in one particular social scene or something like that. It shouldn't be like that anyway, you know.
Yeah, I think
Which isn't to say that those social scenes aren't fun and great for some people, but it also shouldn't, you know, obviously it shouldn't, you know, if you're feeling like it's a pressure to participate in a certain way that's not comfortable for you, that shouldn't be something that's connected in any way to your art or how you live your life, certainly.
I think a lot of cartoonists get really caught up in whatever scene that they identify in. I think a lot of cartoonists, and same with DIY music, you know, same with, you know, DIY ice cream ice cream makers, whatever scene you're in. People like to say that, oh, it's a community, blah, blah, blah. It's a community. It's like, no, it's not a community. It's a scene. People, if you would have brought all of these people together in the same room for Bill Cartaloctopus's birthday, there's going to be some bad blood there. You're going to get these people from Ohio, from LA, from San Francisco, from New York, from Philly, from Rhode Island, from Chicago. They're not all going to get along. It's a scene. We all practice the same thing, but it's not necessarily a community. I think people force that word onto whatever group of people are doing the same kind of thing. Just because it's a niche medium doesn't mean that we all have to be best friends. I mean, I've always tried to be nice to people, but my God, it's like these people, it's like he doesn't have to be this forced Mr. Rogers neighborhood view on life, because these people are vicious on social media and they talk about people as if they're not real human beings. I don't like to post my thoughts on social media because I've made that mistake before. I don't like podcasts where you expend your vocalizations on the earth every second about everything all the time. I think it's like process it into the work and let it take its time and be nice to people in your life that you meet in the scene, you know. But I've, you know, at this point, I've lost track of the question that was asked. But I went on a ramble.
That's good. Listen, we're hitting 2 solid hours, Nate. I think this, you know,
Whoa!
we got a lot of good questions. But I think this is a good moment to wrap it up. I want
Whoa!
to thank all the folks who stuck around through our early technical difficulties. We had a great turnout tonight. Nate, most of all, thanks to you for sharing. I mean, you have been a Russian nesting doll of insight tonight. Every time you open up one little doll, there's another thing inside there. And once again, next week, our talk will be with Michael Ficaris, talking about the Australasian comics scene. Any last words you want to say before we peace out, Nate?
Last call for anybody who's curious about anything. I would like to thank anybody who's watched this. Jeez, who the fuck is watching this? My God, get a life. Thank you for everybody. I would like to thank Bill Cartaloctopus. I would like to thank Austin English. I would like to thank Ben Catcher, all people who I admire so deeply in my relationship to comics and comics that I've read. And these are people who have always been kind to me in my journey and in life. And I just want to say thank you to everybody who's watched, and thank you to anybody who's bought a comic or read a comic and made this strange life of mine possible. Thank you. Don't know what else to say. I was really nervous for this one last epilogue. I was scared as fuck. So thanks. So I'm really glad this is over. And I'm really glad that I'll never have to speak in front of a camera again until I agree to it regrettably again one time in the future.
All right. Thanks again. Good night, everyone. And see you next week at the New York Comics and Picture Symposium. Be well. Bye-bye.
Bye. Bye.
Yeah.
Bye.
Take
Bye.
care, Nate.